past 8 p.m. in the UK. So I hope you're all having a nice chill evening wherever you are. I've just finished my nice lemon and ginger herbal tea, so I'm in a very nice, serene, peaceful mood. So I'm ready to discuss this topic, which I think is a very important topic, and I think you guys will take a lot of value from it. So buckle up, listen up, and yeah, let's get right into it. So I believe I've titled it, We Are Not Here to Convince Her, We Are Here to Confirm Her. So, what do I mean by that? Essentially, what I'm saying here is this is a process of qualification, right? So, and when I say qualification, what I mean by that is we are trying to determine if this girl is interested in us, right? So, if we just rewind back to, let's say, the old school pickup days, of people like Mystery or Neil Strauss. And of course, these guys are well past my era. I mean, when they were popping off, I was like 7 years old. So I never came across that space. I was never involved in that space. The most association I've ever had with that space is I was curious about The Game. I think it's called The Game by Neil Strauss. So I bought this, pirated. So I didn't buy it. I downloaded a pirated PDF version of it online just to read it because obviously it's such a, seminal book on game and dating and pickup. So, it's such a notorious piece of work. So I was just curious to read it, but I haven't even finished it because a lot of it was so ridiculous, right? And a big reason why it was ridiculous is because it emphasized this idea of game, right? And obviously, many people have many different definitions of what game is, right? But I think in that particular era, for that particular paradigm, the emphasis was essentially trying to manipulate and convince these girls to like you, right? So they came up with all these elaborate lines and routines and even going as far as wearing weird hats, right? And it was very performative with the intention of trying to game the girl, right? So if we're looking at game not just as a noun but as a verb, right? The idea of gaming the girl is essentially a way of saying you're going to try and convince her and manipulate her and try and get her on your side, and it's this entire process of persuasion, right? And on the surface, it doesn't seem like such a bad thing. And it makes sense when you think about how, obviously, for the longest time, and when I say that, I mean like forever, for a very long time, since the dawn of humanity, people have written about women and dating in all sorts of literature, stretching back to the medieval times, right? And or the classical times or the Renaissance period. And you know, if you read that literature, it's very, you know, it looks as women as these complex creatures who we have to, try to understand because they're so chaotic and mysterious, and we can never quite understand what they really think and feel. And you know that's essentially the gist or the vibe that we've been accustomed to through literature, stretching back thousands of years ago, right? Or at least hundreds of years ago. And, I'm not here to say whether or not that's true, right? I think in general, just humans are complicated in general. And certainly men have certain traits and women are maybe more emotional, and therefore, maybe as guys, we're not as well adapted or well adept at trying to understand these more subliminal, subversive emotions and factors that might dictate how, women respond to us in certain environments. So, yes, I'm not here to say that that premise isn't legit, but what I am saying is that we've almost been conditioned to think in this way. And so when we look at the pickup Neil Strauss mystery game paradigm, It's all based on this idea that women are these complex creatures who we have to convince to like us, right? And the reason it's so flawed, right, is because what it's inherently saying is that I'm not enough as I am, and therefore I have to try and convince this person to like me. And it's great because obviously I've been doing a lot of let's say research into sales, right, as part of this course that I've been working on as a sort of part-time project, just to improve my own understanding of sales, especially now that I have a a coaching service out there. And we were talking about this idea of qualification, right, and how you know you don't want to waste your time with leads that aren't going to be fruitful or have no correlation to what you're trying to sell them, right? So the reason qualification is important is because you're trying to figure out ahead of time if this prospect is even worth pursuing, right? Do they align? Is what I'm selling actually going to be useful to them, right? Do they even have the budget for this type of program? Do in terms of time scales, are they able to implement what I'm selling them, right? If I sell something that takes 10 months to complete, but these guys are rushing and are trying to finish a project in 4 months, then clearly there's a misalignment there, right? And so qualification, and by the way, drop a link, oh sorry, drop a like on the video, guys, if you can. It'll be really appreciated. But continuing on, qualification is important because we don't want to waste time with unqualified leads who will not fruitfully or will not be useful to us, right? And so in the realm of dating, it's the same concept, right? And so that pickup 2003 paradigm was very flawed because it essentially it took men, or it convinced men that we need to somehow solve attraction as this like problem, right? As this complex puzzle that needs to be solved, rather than just maybe looking inward and thinking, well, is the issue really that women are have to be convinced to like me, or am I just not meeting the kind of women that will like me, right? So assuming that, so now moving away from that problem, right, that sort of old school way of thinking, if you move to the current day, I'll also say that thankfully we have gone past that old school way of thinking, but we still run into more pitfalls. And now looking at my own experience, because I can only really speak from my own personal experiences, as someone who dealt with a lot of rejection early on in life, particularly in high school and even in university, as as I went through those experiences, I, in some sense, felt as if I wasn't enough, right? I felt as if I wasn't either good looking enough, or interesting enough, or funny enough, or charismatic enough, or, big enough in terms of physique. And I had all these self doubts, right? And so, as a result of those self doubts and that low self worth, coupled with continuous rejection, I essentially got to a point where I was almost happy with anything I could get, right? So you become a little bit desperate. Or not a little bit, you become desperate. I became a little bit desperate, needy. And in that neediness, right? In that neediness, which stems from that lack of, let's say, validation as well as rejection, there is a very sinister force that begins to beckon and begins to develop inside your mind. And it happened to me. And it's this issue of just accepting. Well, there's two issues. One is you just accept what you can get. But then when you are, when you do, let's say, come across somebody, or there's an opportunity on the door, right? So meaning, let's say I go to a party and I see somebody I like, then at some level, I believe that me showing up as I am, right, my most authentic self, the most authentic version of Ian, whatever that means, I can't do that. I have to suppress that, right, because it didn't work in the past. And so if we couple that lack of self-worth, as well as this idea that I somehow have to convince the girls to like me, then what ends up happening is I put on a mask, I put on a facade, and I become very performative, right? And instead of just showing up authentically, I almost view the process as this difficult uphill battle, right? Where I, the guy, has to game the girl, right? For two reasons. One, because I'm not enough, so I have to employ tactics. And then two, she's complex. She's this complex creature who, has to be convinced in a million different ways. Otherwise, somebody else will go and get her, right? And so when you're in that mindset, which is a mindset that I was in, although at the time I didn't really know it. Thankfully, hindsight, 2020 vision, I can see backwards with a lot more clarity. But at the time, I didn't know, so that's the way that I was operating, right? And it's tough because what was I really conditioning myself to believe, right? I was essentially going into any sort of romantic opportunity thinking I have to convince her to like me. I have to try and get her on my side, right? It never occurred to me that, hold on, what if there are just women out there who will just like me for me, and I don't necessarily have to try super hard, right? I don't have to convince her, right? And so, of course, at the time, I understand, like looking back, I understand why I was in that mindset because it was just based on my experiences, right? Because if you think about it, I already tried to be the authentic version of myself, and that didn't necessarily work well. So I just went to a different strategy. So it makes sense as a logical thinking guy. It makes some level of sense. I'm not saying obviously it's not the right way to go about things, and just because it makes sense, it doesn't really give a full picture, right? So it makes sense from that perspective. But then, of course, when you look at it with, let's say, wiser eyes, you see the flaws in that perspective, right? There are so many flaws with the idea that we have to convince, right? And so, I mean, a big reason why it's full of flaws, or why it's so defective as a method, is because you're inherently saying that this person is on a pedestal and I'm here, and I have to do all this work to get here. But it's funny because if you look at the guys who got girls in high school, or the guys who even get girls now, there's a very common trait most of the time, which is they don't necessarily look like they have to try that hard, right? And we all see these massive differences in the sort of bad boy who just shows up and barely says a word. Maybe he's got that silent riz, as the kids are calling it nowadays, and he doesn't have to do much. And then you've got the guy, the chump, who's just always buying flowers, always doing this, always showing up, always doing this. And again, please don't take this opinion as me saying that you should be one of those red pill guys who's like, never give compliments, or never tell the girl you like her, or don't give, don't be affectionate, or don't do this and that. Like, I'm not saying that at all, right? There's limits, there's boundaries, you know how to be reasonable. But in the context of effort, there seems to be this weird paradox where guys who put the least amount of effort seem to get better results, and then the guys who put in the most amount of effort don't get as many results. Why is that? I think one reason is because there's an inherent power play at it, or so there's an inherent power differential here, where the, let's say, Chad bad boy, he doesn't see himself as below her, right? He's got a good amount of self-worth, right? But whereas the other guy feels like he lacks that self-worth, so he has to make up for it by being extra, by doing too much. And again, I can already hear the comments. Some guys might think, yeah, but Ian, you preach cold approach. So isn't that being needy? Isn't that putting in effort? No, my friend. And the reason why is because with cold approach, what we're really doing here is just trying to find leads, right? So now, if you're out there approaching for 4 hours every single day of the week, that's a bit different, right? Now you're putting in a lot of time into this, right? But let's say you're somebody who goes and does like a 2 hour session on a weekend, right? So in that sense, that you've just put time aside, right? And you've said, okay, this is where I'm going to put some effort and some time and some energy into my dating life, intentionally, rather than just mindlessly swiping on a dating app to no success at all. And you're going out there and you're making it your intentions clear. And more importantly, a step above that is the fact that if you're doing this correctly, then the neediness is more so about how you conduct yourself. The neediness or the effort or the desperation, it's actually more so about the way that you approach, right? And so this is actually this ties into what I'm trying to say here, which is we're not here to convince anybody. We're here to confirm. And so when it comes to the approaching, right, the guy who feels the need to convince would be a guy who's always closing for every single number, right? Or realizes, hold on, okay, this girl hasn't really given me too much interest, but I'm still gonna try and pursue her anyway, right? And maybe convince her, right? Turn a maybe girl into a yes girl, right? And so that that type of mindset is the destructive part of the mindset, right? That's where the neediness is. Because again, what are we doing here? If you're somebody who does that, right? So again, putting it back to myself, because I can only speak from my experience, although I know my experience is very relatable to a lot of guys, whether you know it or not, or whether you like to admit it or not. But I definitely used to just close any single girl that gave me a shred of interest, right? And I wasn't really qualifying her, meaning I wasn't really determining, okay, is she actually interested? Is she engaged? Is she facing me directly, or is she sort of shuffled away in a different direction? And to be fair, at the start, when you're learning the skill, I think it's important to just close as much as you can just to get practice and get better and yeah, become acclimatized to that process of asking for a number or trying to set up a date. But as you get better, you need to learn this really important skill, which is the ability to filter genuine interest from non uninterested interest or a lack of interest. So genuine interest versus no interest. And again, this is a byproduct of practice, right? You do get better at this filtering process as you do more approaches, as you go on more dates, right? And so that's how I learned, right? And so again, this is probably one of those unlearnable lessons where you can't learn it theoretically, even if I demonstrate it to you in a live stream or lay it out for you in a live stream. You're still gonna have to go out there and experience it for yourself, because it is a sort of lived experience that allows you to gain this perspective. But I'm just preparing you ahead of time, right? And hopefully I can save you, you know, mental energy, from wasting that mental energy trying to chase girls who aren't actually that interested in you and never were and never will be, right? And so nowadays I've sort of almost developed this principled framework where I will not entertain any sort of girl who's seems to be not putting in any effort, right? Or, even let's say for demonstration purposes on, camera, or if I'm doing like a in-field recording session, then yeah, maybe I'll just close just to demonstrate how I would normally go about the close. But even then, I've got to a point where I'm pretty good at understanding who's more likely to be responsive and who's not likely to be responsive. And so, but that being said, my mentality nowadays going into approaches is I'm not here to convince anybody to like me. I'm not here to convince anybody. I'm here to confirm interest that already existed. So for me, cold approach isn't about going in for approaches and trying to convince girls to like you through game. I think cold approach is just a way to find the girls who already liked you regardless, right? You just have to go there with confidence to confirm the sale or confirm the lead, or to confirm or to qualify the lead, right? And so turning it from a convincing process to a confirmation process is much better, because now that also says I'm cool as I am, I'm good enough, I don't need to be extra, I can just present my authentic self as it appears. And I know in the back of my mind that there are girls out there who will fuck with that. There are girls out there who will be responsive to that. And I don't have to game anybody, right? And I think part of coming to this realization is also, again, through the lived experiences. So I've been on dates and I've gotten details from girls who made it so easy to set up a date, right? And then I've also gone on dates with girls who maybe made it a bit more difficult. And again, look, I'm not saying that every single opportunity has to be seamless. People have their own lives, right? They're busy, they've got other things going on, people have to postpone. Sometimes, yeah, sometimes people take a bit of time to respond to text messages. I'm the same way. So, of course, take what I'm saying. Yeah, like, like take what I'm saying and be aware enough to, you know, understand where it applies and where it doesn't apply, right? Because yes, every situation is fairly unique. So I'm not going to make like a big blanket statement. But yeah, generally speaking, you should be good at understanding whether this person is making it easier for me, right? And because, even if we're taking it a step further, it's like I've, I've been with girls who just made it so easy to set the date up, right? There on the spot. Or on text, it's so easy going back and forth. If I suggest a day and she's not busy, then she's sorry. If I suggest a day and she is busy on that day, then she'll be like, "Yeah, I can't make it there, but let's do Sunday," and it's like boom, bap, bap, done. You know. And so why would I waste my time trying to convince somebody else, you know, or chasing somebody else, or double texting this person, or hoping that this person comes around one time, right? That's all just a scarcity mindset, which again I understand because we're sort of like there's a neediness there where we'll take what we can get. But I don't like that because you're sacrificing your principles, and a big part of getting good at this game is just not sacrificing your principles in order to get some poom or to get some punani. Like I don't think that's a an honorable way to go about things. But again, like I said, it's a learning curve, right? I'm not like shaming anybody for doing that sort of stuff because it's part of the learning process. But eventually you should come around and don't slip back into old habits because I'm guilty of it. Sometimes, I approach a really stunning girl and, the conversation went okay, but a part of me knows that I'm not quite sure if she's very, very interested. And I still go for the close, maybe just because it could potentially go somewhere. And, what do you know? It doesn't really go anywhere, right? And so in those instances, I'm always like, okay, I'm a little bit disappointed, but at the same time, I kind of knew that this wasn't like a somebody who was, proper interested. And again, like sometimes it's hard to tell, right? Some girls are way too, they're shy and they don't really explicitly show how interested they are in the initial interaction. But, even in those cases, when I think about the girls I've been on dates with who were, let's say, traditionally more shy, I could still sense the vibe, I could still tell that there was interest there, even if it wasn't verbally obvious, right? And so again, it's maybe a skill, maybe it is a skill, but I could certainly tell the difference there. And it's great again, right? This is why going in for more approaches, doing more volume, iterating is great because once you get those experiences, you have a body of work, right? You can look back at all these different case studies and go, okay, this is how I navigated setting up this date, and then this is what happened, and so I can use that as like sort of like leverage or as like evidence that I can, well, I can use it as evidence that one, these kind of girls exist, meaning I don't have to go and convince anybody because I've already been with somebody who was on me from day one, from the get go. And also bearing in mind this also applies to, let's say, the caliber of girl, right? Because let's keep it real, yeah. You guys want to be, if I mean, again, I don't know what you guys want from cold approach dating. Some of you want short-term relationships and just want to get some more experience because maybe you missed out on that, and some of you just want to get into long-term relationships, which I think is great as well. Whatever you want, right? Point is, um, once you've gotten experiences, right, with, let's say, like really attractive girls that maybe one time in your life you thought that were out of your league, then you realize, wait, like I was with a really attractive, let's say, baddie who made it so easy for me to set this date up, and things went very far romantically. So why am I then slipping back into old habits where I think I need to convince this other, really attractive girl to like me? I don't have to convince her to like me at all. And again, I think this is just the process of growth, and this is why I love cold approach, because this applies to everything else in life, right? Like, why are we trying to, like, you know, almost, I was gonna say, like, pillage ourselves, or, like, bend over backwards to get validation from people who aren't giving it back to us. Like, even when it comes to friends, I don't even think we do that with our friends, right? Like, when it comes to our friends, we're very quick to, you know, denounce that kind of behavior, right? That kind of treatment, right? We don't allow people to just fling us around or take the piss out of us. But all of a sudden, with guys, as soon as it comes to women, it's like, oh yeah, now we're willing to bend our morals and bend our principles. And I get it, again, scarcity, frustration, dry streaks, lack of action. It's biological. I get it, but we have to get past this biological evolutionary excuse. We need to get into, let's think from a more, let's say, even godlike perspective, right? Let's really go above and beyond just the primal brain and the primal needs. I know it's difficult because that's where the subconscious is, and it's very difficult. I know, but I think, yeah, it's just worth always bearing this perspective in mind because it will help you. It will help you, and it will take you far. So my advice is, don't always be closing if you've already been getting dates and having experiences. Like, now you need to level up, go a step above, right? Now get into this idea that I'm the guy who's to be desired, right? I'm the guy who's got the courage. I'm the guy who's built this cool life. I'm the person who's had all this success, or I've gained these accolades. I'm respected in my community. I take risks. I help people. Um, and so, therefore, why am I putting anybody on a pedestal, right? Why? Why am I here trying to convince somebody? No, no, no. It's not. That's not how it works now, right? Now it's a case of, do I actually like this person? Are they actually interesting? Are they being respectful? Do they make things easy for me? Right? Those are the questions that I'm asking myself now. And again, sometimes I slip into bad habits. I'm not perfect. I'm not here to be a paragon of perfection. That is not me at all. But I've made a fuck ton of progress. And so I want to hopefully get you guys on that same wagon, right? So that you can just have more self respect. Because I think it all goes back to self respect, right? Like, we need to have self respect. Um, and if you're doing things that go against your principles, then you're losing self respect. And I think that's really important. So, like I said, do not convince, confirm, right? Always be qualifying. And so, on that note, that's all I wanted to say. Have a good evening, boys. I will be doing another live stream tomorrow. Obviously, keeping up with the commitment of a live stream every single day. Well, basically, we're close to halfway through February, so far so good. I have kept up the promise. It's going to be a little bit more difficult once the immersion's coming up with my client, and yeah, but either way, that's never been an excuse, right? Just because it's difficult doesn't mean I can't do it. So now let's keep on going, and yeah, take care, boys. Oh, and also thank you for the likes. 7 likes, prime.